Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to give a little bit of a chat and maybe a little bit of a story on what's called systemic innovation. So this is really looking at professional innovation management, but actually based on a systemic approach, so the systems thinking. And for those who maybe seen Mark Enzer yesterday, it's a build and an extension from that as well. So a little bit about me. So I'm a civil engineer by training. I've worked in various projects all around the world, had the pleasure of travelling in all kinds of areas and different cultures, which I think is quite important in this area. I also represent the UK government through BSI on the new innovation management standard, which is ISO 56001, which came out last November, and there's a whole sequence, and what I'm going to talk about is based on that as well. So maybe just go through systems, innovation, a little bit of a worked example around that, and a few conclusions. I hope it's useful. So, what's a system? Well, it might be a collection of elements within an environment for a purpose with some interconnections or emergent properties that come out of systems. These are maybe some examples of systems, which is on the left-hand side is more of the built environment on a city and obviously a connected place for the conference. But there are other types of systems. So there's digital systems, some interconnections. Maybe the third diagram is just a collection of random parts, but actually right through to management systems, well, on the right-hand side, which is actually the innovation management system. One of the really important parts, and my colleague Brendan, who's with us today, and Justin, we just did a nice workshop on this as well, has reminded me on how important it is when you're understanding and building a system is not just to draw it into a sort of digital representation in a separate room, but actually collaborate and think about what data, who are the stakeholders are involved in this, and involve a collaborative planning in a staged way to build the system together, understand different perspectives, lots of listening involved, lots of understanding the different terminologies. So this is an example of how we'd go through a collaborative mapping exercise to actually produce the system. But in doing so, we are listening and building consensus, which will come to great advantage later on in the project. So that was the systems piece. The innovation management piece here, this is the diagram for the what I call the burger, sometimes the walnut, but this is the document and the diagram taken from 56001, which represents an innovation management system. And these are the classic parts of the context, leadership, through the requirement for collaborative planning and actually portfolio management, ecosystem management. In the middle is through from the intent of why are you innovating through to the value. That's financial and non-financial value for whatever the stakeholder is values. And then supported by the right type of information, knowledge, money. In fact, I had a great talk, a discussion last night with a little bit of challenge and saying we're actually in the financial centre and the stock exchange next door. How are we collaborating with our colleagues next door to bring that into the innovation management system, which was a great challenge, thank you. But that's an innovation management system, and the two might work together. Indeed, from the ISO, the 8th principle, which is the bottom right on this, is actually take a systems approach for this, because innovation is a lot about uncertainty, maybe how you take and move from your initial assumptions through to knowledge. In fact, you can measure that. One of the metrics is knowledge to assumption ratios in innovation. As you can measure the metrics of how you're reducing uncertainty, managing risk, taking opportunity. So the example, and this is the example in East Anglia of the strategic resource options, and it taking through what my colleagues have done initiated by organisations within the Anglian region, but taking that opportunity to broaden out in a collaborative planning way to cascade the full benefits across a region of the company by working between water companies and agriculture and the flood management systems and other areas as well. So the picture is actually of one of the strategic resource options, otherwise known as a reservoir, and there's one in Abingdon as well, near Oxford. And this is part of a large programme of water resources through the UK, which also broadens out to actually moving water from the northwest to the southeast as well in a very long strategic planning. And these are huge investments. One of the important aspects, as I mentioned before, was when you're building the system, which is the bottom diagram, and actually understanding what that is very importantly involving the communities and all the stakeholders in this sort of double diagram of circles to build that consensus, build actually the community whilst you're building the system. So the system of the human interactions and that team is equal, if not more important, than the physical system that itself. So this is a sort of area that and the approach that we've been using. So the consequence of that was a fantastic strategic discussion ending up with tangible actions. As I understand, the benefits are around 5 billion for about a 1 billion investment around this, so 5x benefit, NPV calculator, and there's some data if anyone wants to ask about that afterwards. But the point is the cascading benefits triggered by a conversation about water, but cascade through the whole region into agriculture, local tourism, reducing or increasing flood resilience, the whole thing as well. So systems approach for benefits for many. So if anyone who saw Mark's talk yesterday, Mark Enzi, you might recognise the diagram. I hope he's not here because I filled with it a little bit actually, so it's a slightly different version. But on the top diagram, you've got these different parts, which is moving away from having interventions or projects, which is the red diamond, straight into outcomes. Actually work through the system, understand the system, collaboratively build the system together so that interventions operate on the system and actually the emergent properties of the system produce the outcomes in normally a very highly complex way and sometimes in an unintended way as well, but you can manage it and understand it through the systems mapping. The other part I'd point out, and this is what we do in more of the innovation side of things, is use some of the tools like business model canvases, which are little diagrams around there. And the reason I love using these is that it reminds me and the team that the innovations have this hipster, hacker, heckler approach, or feasible, desirable, viable, this trilogy of trilogies where you don't just focus on the technical side of things from TRLs, but understand the market, the emerging market, the users, the buyers, and also understand the commercial mechanisms, the insurance, the financial models, the business models that go with that as well. So it's understanding the top left technical, top right market, and the bottom on the commercial and the P&L that goes with this as well. So that sort of keeps us focused around that. So that's a sort of manifestation of bringing systems thinking and a systemic approach and innovation management all together, which is our latest thinking. And these type of things, I have to look around because I can't read that, I'm afraid. I'm going like that. Of systems of innovation is probably a new way of creating value for the country and the world and to the SDGs around this. This is a structured, agile way of actually making an impact within the world, and how we map that, how we collaborate and build up the consensus around that, build up new communities, work together is really key, and get to those valued outcomes. So hope that was of interest, and thank you very much.
I think we've got time for a question if anybody wants to ask. In that case, look. Oh, you agree? Go.
Not him. No.
one quick one.
There's a mic coming, yeah.
Your last point, valued outcomes. Are you thinking of the valued outcome for the guys over the road here in the London Stock Exchange?
Yes, and more. So the valued outcomes are defined as financial and non-financial value. So understanding us, and just we had little in joke because we had a really good conversation at the end of yesterday. So understanding how the profitability is maintained and revenue streams for stakeholders around that is probably the key point, and actually be a sustainable financial mechanism around that. But actually there's the other parts, which is the social value and the economic, the full SDG aspect. So it's actually both. In my experience on looking at this, it's understanding what is valued from the stakeholders in the first place. And there's three different things. There's the buyers, the users, and there are intermediaries as well, the whole procurement system. And Rikesh Shah, who's here as well, and IPEC, has a lot to say on that one as well. So yes and more, I think, short answer.
John, thank you very much. Round of applause to John, please.
Thank you.